The gun came up fast, but the waitress didn't scream. She didn't drop the tray, didn't run, didn't beg. She just exhaled, like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. And when the gunman called her real name out loud, everyone in the bar realized they'd been standing next to the wrong woman. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. Alright, let's get back into it. The assault rifle came up fast, military grade. Black metal gleaming under the bar's amber lights, but the waitress holding the tray of empty glasses didn't scream. She didn't drop anything. She didn't freeze like the others. She exhaled. Like she'd been holding her breath for years and violence was the permission to finally let it out. Patricia Cabello, though no one in Delgado's corner bar knew that name, stood perfectly still behind the counter, her dark eyes fixed on the weapon now sweeping across the room. Her fingers tightened around the black serving tray she held against her chest like a shield, knuckles white, but her breathing remained controlled, measured, the kind of calm that comes from muscle memory, not courage. Around her, chaos erupted in slow motion. A chair scraped violently across the floor as someone stumbled backward. Glass shattered, a beer bottle hitting the ground, amber liquid spreading across the sticky tiles. A woman near the pool table let out a sharp, broken sob. The jukebox continued playing some forgotten rock ballad from the 90s, tinny and out of place, like a soundtrack to the wrong movie. But Patricia didn't move. The gunman stood near the entrance, his leather jacket darkened with rain, his face twisted with something between rage and vindication. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with a close-cropped beard and eyes that hadn't slept well in years. His hands were steady on the weapon. Practiced. "Everybody on the ground," he shouted, voice raw and electric. "Now!" The patrons obeyed immediately. Bodies hit the floor, some scrambling, some dropping like stones. A man in a flannel shirt knocked over a table in his haste. An older woman with silver hair pressed herself flat against the wall, whispering what might have been a prayer. Patricia watched them all. Watched the fear ripple through the room like a current. Watched the gunman's eyes scan the crowd, searching for something. Someone. She knew what was coming before he said it. "Where is she?" The gunman's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and deliberate. He took a step forward, boots crunching over broken glass. "Where's Patricia Cabello?" The name landed like a grenade in the silence that followed. No one moved. No one spoke. Because no one in this bar, not the regulars who came every Thursday, not the line cook who smoked out back, not even the manager who'd hired her 3 years ago knew anyone by that name. They knew Patricia Alvarez. Quiet, reliable, forgettable, Patricia. The waitress who worked doubles without complaint, who remembered drink orders and asked politely about people's days. The woman who kept her head down and her past to herself. But Cabello? That name meant nothing to them. It meant everything to her. Patricia's pulse hammered in her ears, but her face remained blank. She'd learned that skill young, how to bury fear so deep it became invisible, how to stand in a room full of armed men and betray nothing. Her father had taught her that. Her brother had perfected it. The gunman's eyes swept the room again, frustrated now, desperate. "I know you're here," he shouted. "I know you're hiding. You think you can just walk away? You think you can pretend you didn't?" His voice cracked, emotion bleeding through the anger. Patricia felt something twist in her chest. Recognition. Not of his face, she didn't know him, but of his grief. She'd seen it before, in the eyes of widows, in the brothers of men who disappeared, in the children who learned too young what their fathers really did for a living. This man wasn't here for money. He was here for blood, and he thought she owed him. 3 years, the gunman continued, his voice dropping to something quieter, more dangerous. 3 years I've been looking for you, following rumors, chasing ghosts. He laughed bitter and broken. You know how hard it is to find someone who doesn't exist anymore? Patricia's fingers tightened on the tray. Her mind raced through possibilities, exits, weapons, distances. The layout of the bar was burned into her memory, every door, every window, every blind spot. Survival instincts she'd spent years trying to bury were clawing their way back to the surface. The back door was 15 feet away, locked from the inside. She could reach it in 4 seconds if she ran, but the gunman would see her move. And the people on the floor, the regulars, the strangers, the woman still whispering prayers, they'd be caught in whatever came next. Patricia had left that world to stop making those calculations, to stop weighing lives against strategy, to stop being the girl who survived by letting others fall. But old instincts don't die. They just wait. "I know you're here, Patricia," the gunman said again, quieter now, almost pleading. "I know you can hear me." She could feel eyes on her. Not the gunman's, not yet, but others. The bartender, crouched behind the counter 3 feet away, was staring at her with wide, confused eyes. He'd worked beside her for 2 years, shared cigarettes on slow nights, complained about tips and rent and shitty customers. Now he was looking at her like a stranger, because he'd heard the name, heard the way the gunman said it, like it meant something. Patricia met his gaze for half a second, long enough to see the question forming, then looked away. The gunman took another step forward. His boots echoed against the floor. The rifle swept left, then right, barrel moving across faces, searching. "You killed my brother," he said, voice shaking now. "You and your family. You tore everything apart and walked away like it didn't matter. Like we didn't matter." Patricia's breath caught. She hadn't killed anyone, not directly, but she'd helped dismantle the machinery that did. She'd given her brother the information he needed to burn their father's empire down from the inside, to stop the cycle before it consumed them both. She'd thought it was mercy, but mercy always leaves bodies behind. The gunman's eyes finally landed on her. It wasn't recognition, not at first, just a sweep of the room, cataloging faces. But then he paused, frowned, his gaze sharpened. Patricia didn't look away. And in that moment, that single, suspended breath, something shifted in his expression. Confusion giving way to certainty, certainty giving way to rage. "You," he whispered. The rifle turned toward her. And Patricia Cabello, who'd spent 3 years pretending to be someone small and safe and forgettable, finally stopped pretending. She met his eyes, steady, unflinching, and waited for the world she'd buried to come crashing back. Patricia Cabello was 7 years old the first time she watched her father make someone disappear. Not literally, not in front of her, but she'd seen the man arrive, nervous, sweating through his shirt despite the air conditioning in their family's sprawling estate. She'd been sitting on the marble staircase, small hands gripping the banister, watching through the gaps as her father led the stranger into his office. The door had closed with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. 30 minutes later, the man walked out, pale, shaking, eyes hollow like something vital had been scooped out of him. Her father had followed, adjusting his cufflinks, expression placid as a lake. He'd glanced up at Patricia, perched on the stairs, and smiled, gentle, warm, the same smile he wore when he tucked her in at night. "Go find your brother, Misha," he'd said. "It's almost dinner." She'd nodded and ran off to find Aaron, who was 9 and already learning to stand the way their father stood. Straight-backed, immovable. That night at dinner, no one mentioned the man who'd come to the house. No one mentioned the phone call her father took halfway through the meal, or the way his jaw tightened before he excused himself. No one mentioned anything at all. And Patricia learned her first lesson about the life she'd been born into. Silence wasn't just golden, it was survival. By the time she was 12, Patricia understood the architecture of her father's empire better than most of the men who worked for him. Not because anyone taught her, her father would have preferred she stay soft, sheltered, decorative, a daughter to marry off strategically when the time came. But Patricia was observant in ways that made her dangerous without meaning to be. She noticed patterns. The way certain names appeared in her father's calendar before shipments arrived. The way men spoke in coded half-sentences when they thought no one important was listening. The way money moved clean on paper, filthy underneath. She noticed how fear worked, how loyalty was purchased, not earned, how violence didn't need to be loud to be effective. And she noticed her brother. Aaron had grown into their father's world like a tree growing toward sunlight, natural, inevitable, unquestioning. By 15, he was accompanying their father to meetings. By 17, he was handling minor disputes. By 20, he was the heir everyone whispered about with equal parts respect and dread. He was good at it. Brilliant, even. Calm where their father was volatile. Strategic where their father was impulsive. But Patricia saw what it cost him. She saw it in the way his hands shook after certain phone calls, even though his face stayed smooth. She saw it in the nightmares he pretended not to have, the ones that left him pacing the hallways at 3 a.m. She saw it in the way he looked at her sometimes like she was the only thing in their world that hadn't been corrupted yet, like she was something worth protecting. She loved him for that. She hated him for it too, because protection in their world meant complicity, and complicity meant blood. Patricia was 19 when she signed off on her first real decision. Not officially, she had no title, no role in the organization, but her father had learned to value her insight, her ability to see the patterns no one else noticed, her knack for reading people. So when he'd asked her opinion on a supply route dispute casually, over breakfast, like he was asking about the weather, she'd answered honestly. "Reroute through the southern corridor," she'd said, not looking up from her coffee. "The northern contact is skimming. He'll get sloppy and draw attention within 6 months." Her father had studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 3 weeks later, the northern contact was gone, replaced, erased. No one told Patricia what happened to him. She didn't ask, but she knew. And that night, she'd stared at her ceiling until dawn, wondering when exactly she'd crossed the line from observer to participant, wondering if there'd even been a line at all, or if she'd been born on the wrong side of it. By 22, Patricia had become invaluable. She didn't carry guns, didn't attend the violent meetings, didn't get her hands dirty in any visible way, but she was the one who noticed when shipments didn't add up, the one who identified which partners were becoming liabilities, the one who quietly, efficiently, helped her father and brother dismantle threats before they became disasters. She told herself it was harm reduction, that her involvement made things less bloody than they'd be otherwise. She told herself a lot of things that stopped being true somewhere along the way. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. A family had been caught in the crossfire of a territorial dispute. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong neighborhood. A father, a mother, 2 kids under 10. Collateral damage, her father had called it. Regrettable but unavoidable. Aaron had stood in the office afterward, jaw tight, knuckles white against the desk. He'd argued for reparations, for pulling back from that territory entirely. Their father had refused. "We don't show weakness," he'd said. "Not for anyone." Patricia had watched her brother's face harden, watched something inside him calcify, and she'd realized with sudden, crushing clarity, they were all dying in this life, some faster than others. But the ending was the same. Aaron would become their father. She would become the silent architect of atrocities. And one day, they'd train the next generation to do the same, unless someone broke the cycle. She started planning her exit that night. Not escape, she wasn't naive enough to think she could truly escape, but extraction. Separation. A surgical removal of herself from the machinery before it ground her down completely. It took 8 months of careful preparation. Falsified documents, quiet savings transfers, a new identity built piece by piece. She told Aaron 2 weeks before she left. They'd sat in his apartment, the one place in the city their father's surveillance didn't reach, and she'd watched her brother's face cycle through disbelief, anger, grief, and finally, reluctant understanding. "You'll never be safe," he'd said quietly. "Not completely. I know. He'll look for you. I know. I won't stop him." Patricia had smiled sadly. "Yes, you will." And Aaron had looked at her, really looked at her, and known she was right. Because beneath all the violence and calculation, beneath the empire and the expectations, Aaron loved his sister more than he loved their father's approval. He'd let her go. And Patricia had walked away from the only world she'd ever known, carrying nothing but a suitcase and the crushing weight of everything she'd helped destroy. She'd thought distance would bring peace. She'd been wrong. Peace was just another word for borrowed time. Aaron Cabello learned to sleep with his eyes open when he was 16. Not literally, though. There were nights after particularly brutal meetings when rest felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. But figuratively, metaphorically, in every way that mattered. He learned to stay alert even in stillness, to calculate even in silence, to never fully relax, because relaxation was the crack in the armor where bullets found their way through. Their father had taught him that. Right before he died, the old man had been shot 3 times in a restaurant bathroom by a partner who decided betrayal was more profitable than loyalty. Sloppy work, desperate work, the kind of amateur-hour violence their father had spent decades rising above. It had killed him anyway. Aaron had been 23, Patricia had been 21, and in the chaos that followed the scrambling, the power vacuum, the vultures circling what remained of the Cabello Empire, Aaron had made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He didn't burn it all down, he rebuilt it. The empire Aaron inherited was a dying thing, bloated, corrupt, built on his father's paranoia and unchecked brutality. Half the operation was hemorrhaging money through outdated methods and partners who'd grown too comfortable stealing. The other half was a ticking time bomb of violence waiting to implode. Everyone expected him to fail. Some actively hoped for it. Aaron proved them all wrong. He spent the first year cutting away the rot. Not with the explosive purges his father would have orchestrated public executions designed to terrify everyone into submission. Aaron's method was surgical, quiet. Men who'd stolen simply stopped showing up to meetings. Contracts that didn't make sense were renegotiated or dissolved. Operations that drew too much attention were shuttered before law enforcement could build cases. It looked like attrition, natural turnover. It was anything but. Patricia had helped him with those early decisions. Her mind for patterns, for seeing the cascading consequences 3 moves ahead, it had been invaluable. They'd worked together in his apartment late into the night. Spreadsheets and ledgers spread across the table, untangling their father's mess. "This contact in the Port Authority," she'd said one night, tapping a name on the page. "He's going to flip. 6 months, maybe less. The feds already have his partner." Aaron had studied the file. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He'd nodded, made a note. The contact was gone within a week, not killed, just relocated to a position where he'd have nothing useful to offer investigators. A gentle removal. Patricia had looked exhausted that night, hollowed out. "We're just making it cleaner," Aaron had said, trying to convince himself as much as her. "Smaller, less collateral damage." She'd met his eyes. "We're still making it," and something in her voice, the resignation, the grief, had told him she wouldn't stay much longer. When Patricia left, Aaron didn't try to stop her. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. Every instinct screamed at him to protect her, to keep her close, to lock down every avenue of escape until she understood that leaving made her vulnerable in ways staying never would. But he'd seen what the life had done to her. The way she flinched at loud noises. The way she stared at her hands sometimes like they belonged to someone else. The way she'd stopped sleeping more than a few hours at a time. She was drowning, and the empire was the water, so he'd let her go. He'd helped her disappear documents, money, a trail so cold, not even their father's old contacts could follow it. He'd told the few people who asked that she'd moved abroad, married, wanted privacy. Most people stopped asking. The ones who didn't, Aaron made sure they understood the subject was closed. Running the empire without Patricia was like losing his peripheral vision. He was still effective, still strategic, still the calm, controlled presence that kept everything from flying apart, but he missed her insight, her ability to see the human cost of decisions before he made them, her occasional interventions that stopped him from becoming the thing they'd both feared he'd become. Without her, Aaron had to be more vigilant, more careful with himself, because it would be easy, so easy to slip into their father's patterns, to rule through fear instead of respect, to solve problems with maximum force instead of minimum necessary violence. Some days, he caught himself considering it, the simpler path, the brutal efficiency of old methods. Those were the days he thought about Patricia most. Wondered if she'd found what she was looking for, wondered if she slept better now, wondered if she ever thought about him, or if distance had finally given her the peace to forget. He hoped it had. He checked on her anyway. Aaron's method was simple. He never went himself, never sent anyone who'd recognize her, never left a trail that could lead back to her location. Instead, he used a rotation of independent contractors, private investigators, retired cops, people with no connection to his organization, and paid them generously to confirm one thing, that she was alive and safe. That was all he needed to know. The reports came quarterly, always brief, always professional. Subject located, no signs of distress, routine unchanged, no contact with former associates. It should have been enough. It wasn't. Because the reports didn't tell him if she was happy, didn't tell him if she'd built the life she'd wanted, the husband, the children, the ordinary future she'd dreamed about, didn't tell him if leaving had actually saved her, or if she was just surviving in a different kind of silence. But Aaron didn't ask for more details, because asking would be selfish, would be him imposing on the life she'd fought so hard to build away from him. So he accepted the reports, filed them away, and told himself it was enough that she was breathing. 3 years after Patricia left, Aaron had transformed the Cabello empire into something unrecognizable from their father's reign, smaller, quieter, more legitimate on the surface, with only the necessary darkness underneath. He diversified real estate, investments, businesses that generated clean money and provided cover for the operations that didn't. He'd earned respect without demanding it, loyalty without purchasing it through fear. People called him reasonable, professional, a businessman who happened to have history in less savory circles. It was exactly what he'd intended. But on a humid Thursday evening in September, when Aaron's phone buzzed with an alert from the monitoring service he'd set up around Patricia's location, a service that flagged unusual 911 calls, police activity, anything that might indicate trouble, everything changed. The alert was simple. Multiple emergency calls. Armed incident. Delgado's Corner Bar. Aaron stared at the screen. That was Patricia's workplace. He didn't hesitate, didn't call ahead, didn't send someone to assess the situation first. He just moved. Because Aaron Cabello had let his sister go once, he wouldn't make that mistake twice. Eric Martins was 12 years old when his brother stopped coming home. Not all at once, that would have been cleaner, somehow. Easier to process. But Tommy had disappeared in increments. First staying out later than usual, then overnight. Then days at a time, coming back with cash he wouldn't explain and bruises he'd wave off with a grin. "Just work stuff, little man," Tommy would say, ruffling Eric's hair. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Eric had worried, because he'd seen the change, the way Tommy's eyes had hardened, the way he'd started carrying a gun tucked in his waistband like it was normal, the way their mother cried quietly in the kitchen when she thought no one was listening. Tommy had gotten involved with the Cabello organization when he was 19. Small jobs at first, running messages, watching shipment routes, being an extra body when numbers mattered. He'd called it an opportunity, a way up and out of the neighborhood that had nothing else to offer. Their mother had called it a death sentence. She'd been right. Tommy Martins died 3 weeks before his 24th birthday. The official story, the one the police wrote down and promptly filed away without investigation, was gang violence. Wrong place, wrong time. A casualty of the endless territorial wars that plagued the city's underworld. But Eric knew better, because he'd heard the whispers, seen the fragments of truth in his brother's final weeks. Tommy had been scared, paranoid, looking over his shoulder constantly. He'd told Eric to stay away from certain people, certain places, had made Eric promise that if anything happened he'd get out, go to college, build a life that didn't end in alleys or unmarked graves, the empire's eating itself. Tommy had said one night, voice low and urgent, "The old man's losing control. People are choosing sides. And if you're on the wrong one when it all comes down." He hadn't needed to finish the sentence. 2 weeks later, Tommy was dead. Eric had tried to move on, tried to honor his brother's final wish. He'd enrolled in community college, worked 2 jobs, kept his head down. But grief doesn't follow straight lines. And questions don't die just because answers are dangerous. Eric started digging, quietly at first, asking old neighbors, people who'd known Tommy, anyone who might have seen something. Most people shut down immediately. Fear was a powerful silencer, but eventually, Eric found someone willing to talk. An older man who'd worked security for the Cabello organization during the transition period, who'd seen the purges, the consolidation, the careful dismantling of the old guard. It wasn't random, the man had said, voice rough with whiskey and regret. Somebody on the inside was feeding information, pointing out who was skimming, who was getting sloppy, who was going to become a problem. "Your brother." He got flagged. And once you're flagged in that world, you're already dead. "Who?" Eric had demanded. "Who was feeding information?" The man had shaken his head. "I don't know names, but word was it came from the family, the old man's kids. They were cleaning house before they rebuilt, being surgical about it." Eric had left that conversation with his hands shaking and something dark and molten hardening in his chest. The Cabello family hadn't just killed his brother. They'd calculated it, planned it, decided his life was an acceptable loss in their restructuring. For 5 years, Eric tried to let it go. He finished school, got a job in construction, dated a woman who made him laugh, built something resembling a normal life. But Tommy's ghost followed him everywhere. Every time Eric saw someone who looked like his brother, every time he passed the corner where Tommy used to wait for him after school, every birthday, every holiday, every moment that should have included one more person, the anger didn't fade. It just learned to wait. And then, 3 months ago, Eric had heard a rumor, a whisper in a bar from a man who claimed to have worked the edges of the old Cabello network. A throwaway comment about how the old man's daughter had disappeared years ago. Just walked away, changed her name and vanished like she'd never been part of it at all. "Smart move," the man had said, half drunk and nostalgic. "She saw what was coming and got out before the blood hit the fan. Can't blame her. She was always too soft for that world anyway." Eric's pulse had quickened. The daughter? Patricia Cabello? Yeah, Patricia. Quiet girl. Real smart though. They say she was the one who helped the son clean up the organization. Pointed out all the weak links before they cut them loose. The words had landed like shrapnel. Patricia Cabello, the architect of the purge that killed his brother, and she just left, walked away from the bodies and the consequences, and built herself a new life somewhere, free and clean and unburdened. While Tommy rotted in a grave their mother couldn't afford a headstone for, finding Patricia had taken Eric 3 months of obsessive searching. He'd tracked down former associates, bribed clerks, followed digital trails through name changes and address histories. He'd spent money he didn't have, called in favors from people he shouldn't have trusted, pushed himself to the edge of sanity, and finally, he'd found her, working as a waitress in a dive bar on the South Side, living in a small apartment under the name Patricia Alvarez. Pretending to be nobody, Eric had watched her for 2 weeks before he made his move. Watched her pour drinks and smile politely at customers who didn't know what she'd been. Watched her walk home alone at night, headphones in, like she didn't have a care in the world. Watched her live the peaceful, ordinary life his brother would never have. The rage had been almost physical, a living thing clawing at his insides. She didn't deserve peace, didn't deserve anonymity, didn't deserve to forget. Eric had considered making it quick, quiet, just ending her the way the organization had ended Tommy, efficient and final. But that felt too easy. She needed to know why, needed to understand what she'd taken, needed to look into the eyes of someone whose life she'd destroyed and reckon with the cost. So Eric had planned a confrontation, public, unavoidable. He'd bring the violence of her old world crashing into her new one, make her answer for what she'd done, make her remember. Standing in Delgado's corner bar now, weapon raised, adrenaline singing through his veins, Eric felt vindicated. He'd found her, called her out, shattered her carefully constructed anonymity. The fear in the room, the screaming patrons, the shattered glass, the chaos, it all felt deserved. Felt like justice finally catching up. Eric's eyes locked onto Patricia behind the counter. She stood impossibly still, clutching that serving tray, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. And for the first time since he'd walked through that door, Eric felt something flicker beneath his rage. Uncertainty, because Patricia Cabello wasn't cowering, wasn't begging, wasn't playing the victim. She was just waiting, like she'd known this moment would come eventually. Like she'd been expecting it. Get up. Eric's voice cut through the bar like a blade. The assault rifle swept across the room, barrel tracking from one terrified face to another. Bodies pressed flatter against the floor. Someone whimpered. "I said get up!" Eric shouted, louder now. "Patricia Cabello, get up and face me!" The jukebox continued its oblivious rotation, some power ballad bleeding into the tension. The neon sign outside flickered, casting red shadows across broken glass and spilled liquor. Rain hammered against the windows. Patricia didn't move. She stood behind the counter, that black serving tray still clutched against her chest, her dark eyes steady on Eric's face. Her heart was hammering, she could feel it pounding against her ribs, taste copper at the back of her throat, but her exterior remained perfectly calm. She'd learned this trick at 14, how to let fear exist somewhere deep inside while the surface stayed glass smooth, how to breathe through panic until it became background noise. It was the only thing from her old life she'd never been able to unlearn. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Eric took a step forward, boots crunching over debris. His hands were white-knuckled on the weapon. "Why would you? I was nobody. Just another casualty you never bothered counting." Patricia's mind raced through possibilities, calculations she hated herself for making. The back exit was still 15 feet away, locked from inside. She could reach it in 4 seconds if she ran, but Eric would see the movement, would fire, and in this confined space, with people scattered across the floor like human obstacles, the bullets wouldn't stop with her. The front entrance was blocked by Eric himself. 20 feet of open space, no cover. The windows were reinforced glass. She'd noticed that her second week working here, the owner had installed them after a break-in years ago. They wouldn't shatter easily. Every option led to bodies. So Patricia stayed still. "My brother worked for your family," Eric continued, voice shaking now. Raw. Tommy Martins. You remember that name? Or were there too many to keep track of? Patricia's breath caught. Martins. The name surfaced from memory like something dredged from deep water. Tommy Martins. Young, eager. One of the low-level runners who'd gotten caught in the purge when she and Aaron had restructured the organization. When they'd identified the liabilities, the skimmers, the people who'd become problems, she remembered the name on a list, remembered the notation beside it, connected to Northern Territory dispute, high risk. She didn't remember a face, didn't remember a person. Just data. Just another calculation in the endless math of survival. "I remember," Patricia said quietly, her first words since Eric had entered. Her voice was steady despite everything. "I remember your brother's name." Something shifted in Eric's expression. Surprise, maybe, that she'd admitted it, that she hadn't denied or deflected or pretended ignorance. He was 23, Eric said, trying to make money to help our mother, trying to build something. And you, his voice cracked, you pointed him out like he was garbage that needed taking out. Patricia felt the words land like physical blows. Because he was right. Not about the details. She'd never known Tommy's age, never known about his mother, never known anything about the person behind the name, but about the essential truth. She had marked him for removal, had identified him as a threat to the Empire's stability, had made the calculation that his life mattered less than the organizational security. She'd told herself it was harm reduction, that cleaning up the operation would lead to less violence overall, that the people they removed were problems who'd get themselves or others killed eventually anyway. All the rationalizations that let her sleep at night, none of them true enough to matter. "I'm sorry," Patricia said, and meant it. "I'm sorry about your brother. I'm sorry about all of it." "Sorry?" Eric laughed, bitter and broken. "You think sorry fixes this? You think sorry brings him back? No." Patricia's hands tightened on the tray. "Nothing fixes it. Nothing brings anyone back. I know that." "Then why did you run?" Eric's voice rose again, cracking with emotion. "Why did you get to just walk away and start over like none of it happened, while the rest of us," he gestured wildly with the rifle, "while the rest of us live with what you did?" Patricia felt tears burning behind her eyes but didn't let them fall. Crying would be obscene, would be asking for sympathy she had no right to. "I ran because I couldn't do it anymore," she said quietly. "Because every decision felt like drowning. Because I looked at my future and saw nothing but more blood, more names, more people like your brother." "So you saved yourself," Eric spat. "How convenient." "Yes," Patricia's voice was steady. "I saved myself, and I left everyone else to carry the weight." "You're right. About all of it." The admission seemed to stun Eric. He'd come here expecting denials, excuses, the slippery politicians speak of criminals who never admitted fault. Instead, Patricia stood there, taking every accusation like she deserved it, because she did. "What do you want from me?" Patricia asked, not pleading, just asking. "You came here for something. What is it? Confession? Punishment? My life for his?" Eric's hands trembled on the weapon. He stopped, started again. "I want you to understand what you took. I want you to feel it." "I do," Patricia said. "Every day, every single day I feel it. The weight doesn't go away just because I changed my name. That's not enough. I know." The bartender beside Patricia, crouched behind the counter with his hands over his head, was staring at her like she was a stranger. Like 3 years of working together had just evaporated. She could feel the other patrons listening, hearing her confess to being part of something dark, something violent. Her carefully constructed anonymity was ash, but she found she didn't care. Not really, because some part of her had been waiting for this moment since the day she left, waiting for the past to find her, waiting for someone to demand an accounting. She just hoped it wouldn't endanger innocent people when it happened. "You want to kill me," Patricia said. Statement, not question. "Then do it, but let everyone else leave first. They're not part of this." Eric's jaw clenched. "You don't give orders anymore." "I'm not ordering, I'm asking." Patricia's voice was calm. "Your fight is with me, with my family, not with them." "Your family," Eric repeated. His eyes narrowed. "Where's your brother? The one who actually pulled the trigger?" Before Patricia could answer, the door behind Eric opened, and Aaron Cabello stepped into the bar. The door didn't slam open, didn't crash back on its hinges, announcing violence and authority. It simply opened, smooth, deliberate, like someone entering a restaurant 5 minutes early for a reservation. Aaron Cabello stepped across the threshold without hurry, without spectacle, without a single wasted movement. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, no tie, top button undone, the kind of expensive simplicity that looked effortless but cost more than most people made in a month. Rain had darkened his shoulders. His dark hair was slicked back, revealing the sharp angles of his face and the geometric tattoos that crept up his neck, remnants of a younger man's defiance that he'd never bothered covering. He didn't look at Eric, not yet. First, he looked at the room. His dark eyes swept across the scene with the calm assessment of a surgeon entering an operating theater. The bodies on the floor, the shattered glass, the overturned furniture, the terrified faces. Then, finally, his gaze found Patricia. Their eyes met across the chaos. Brother and sister, 3 years of silence compressed into a single moment of recognition. Patricia saw relief in his expression, brief, controlled, then buried beneath the stillness that had become his armor. Aaron's attention shifted to Eric, and the temperature in the room dropped. Eric felt it before he understood it. The shift. The sudden awareness that he was no longer the most dangerous presence in the space. That the weapon in his hands, which had felt like power moments ago, had just become inadequate. He spun toward the door, rifle swinging around, finger tightening on the trigger. "Don't move!" Aaron stopped, raised his hands slowly, palms out. Empty, non-threatening, but there was nothing submissive about the gesture. "You're making a mistake," Aaron said quietly. His voice was low, measured, carrying across the bar with the kind of authority that didn't need volume. "Put the weapon down." "I said don't move!" Eric's voice cracked. The rifle barrel wavered. Aaron didn't move, didn't blink. Just stood there with the rain-dampened elegance of someone who'd walked into hostile situations so many times they'd become routine. "You're Eric Martins," Aaron said. Not a question, a statement. "Tommy's younger brother." Eric's eyes widened. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know." Aaron took a single step forward. Small, calculated, testing the boundaries. "Your brother worked for my father's organization. Died during the transition. You blame my sister." "She killed him," Eric shouted. "She marked him for death." "No." Aaron's voice remained calm. "I killed him." The words hung in the air like smoke. Patricia inhaled sharply behind the counter. "Aaron, I made the decisions." Aaron continued, cutting her off without looking away from Eric. "I signed off on every removal, every restructuring, every person we deemed a liability." Patricia provided information, but the orders? Those came from me. It wasn't entirely true. Patricia knew that. The decisions had been collaborative, she'd been just as complicit, just as responsible. But Aaron was doing what he'd always done, stepping between her and consequences, taking the weight she couldn't carry, protecting her even now. Eric's hands shook on the weapon. His face twisted with confusion, rage, grief. "Then you're the one. I'm the one you want," Aaron said simply. He took another step forward. "So point that weapon at me. Not at her. Not at these people. Me." "Aaron, don't." Patricia's voice was urgent now, but her brother ignored her. His focus remained locked on Eric with the intensity of a predator who'd identified exactly how this would end. "You came here for justice," Aaron said. "For recognition. For someone to acknowledge what was taken from you. I'm acknowledging it. Your brother died because I decided the organization's stability mattered more than his life. That's the truth. And if you need blood for blood," he gestured to himself. "Here I am." Eric's mind raced. He'd spent 3 years imagining this confrontation. 3 years building the narrative in his head. Patricia Cabello, the architect of his brother's death, finally brought to account. Forced to face the human cost of her calculations. But this Aaron Cabello calmly offering himself as a target, this wasn't in the script. "You don't get to just—" Eric struggled for words. "You don't get to volunteer like this makes it noble." "There's nothing noble about it," Aaron said. His voice carried a weight Eric hadn't expected, something tired beneath the control. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not claiming this balances anything. I'm telling you that if you pull that trigger, you should know exactly who's responsible for your grief." Aaron took another step, closer now, 10 feet away. Eric could see details he hadn't noticed before. The faint scar along Aaron's jaw, the way his tattoos disappeared beneath his collar, the absolute stillness in his eyes, not empty, but controlled, like someone who'd learned to contain violence so complete it would be catastrophic if released. "Your brother was 19 when he started working for my father," Aaron continued. 23 when he died. He was running packages through the northern corridor, got involved with a partner who was skimming shipments and drawing attention. When we restructured, everyone connected to that operation became a risk. Eric's breath came faster. "You didn't have to kill him. You could have what?" Aaron's voice sharpened slightly. "Warned him? Relocated him? Trusted that he'd stay quiet about what he knew?" He shook his head. "In that world, mercy is the luxury that gets you killed. Your brother understood that. He knew the risks when he signed on. He was trying to help our mother." Eric's voice broke. He was just a kid trying to survive." "I know." And for the first time, something cracked in Aaron's expression, a flicker of what might have been regret. "I know, and I'm sorry. Genuinely. But sorry doesn't resurrect the dead. It never has." Patricia watched her brother move closer to the gunman. Watched him do what he'd always done, absorb the danger, redirect the threat, place himself between her and harm. She wanted to scream at him to stop, to tell Eric that Aaron was lying, that the responsibility was shared, that protecting her wasn't worth his life. But she knew Aaron wouldn't listen, because this was who he'd become. The man who'd stayed in the darkness so she could leave. The brother who'd let her go, knowing he'd carry the weight of their shared history alone. Aaron took another step, 5 feet from the rifle now. Eric's finger trembled on the trigger. "Stay back. Make a choice, Eric," Aaron said quietly. "Shoot me, or put the weapon down. But decide now, because I'm done watching you threaten my sister." The stillness that followed felt like the moment before an avalanche. And then Aaron moved. Aaron moved like water. No warning, no telegraphed aggression. Just sudden, precise motion that closed the 5-foot gap before Eric's brain could translate threat into action. Aaron's left hand came up in a tight arc, striking the rifle barrel and driving it skyward. The weapon discharged a single deafening crack that sent a round into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. Someone screamed, but Aaron was already inside Eric's guard. His right hand locked around Eric's wrist, the one gripping the trigger, and twisted with surgical precision. Not a wild wrench that might cause the weapon to spray bullets across the room. A controlled rotation that exploited the specific mechanics of human anatomy. Eric's fingers spasmed open. The rifle clattered to the floor. Aaron kicked it away in the same motion, sending it skittering across broken glass toward the far wall. Out of reach, neutralized. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. Eric swung wildly with his free hand, a desperate haymaker born of panic rather than training. Aaron didn't block it. He simply wasn't there when the fist arrived. He'd shifted his weight, angled his body, and Eric's momentum carried him forward into empty space. Off balance now, Eric stumbled. Aaron moved with him, not fighting against Eric's momentum, using it. A hand on Eric's shoulder, a foot behind his ankle, and suddenly Eric was on the ground, face first. Aaron's knee pressed between his shoulder blades. Still no shouting, no dramatic pronouncements, just the quiet, terrible efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times to need theatrics. Eric struggled, tried to push up, but Aaron's grip was iron. One hand controlled Eric's right arm, twisted at an angle that promised breaking if Eric pushed too hard. The other pressed against the base of Eric's skull, not choking, not striking, just holding him in place with the certainty of absolute control. "Stop," Aaron said quietly. "It's over." Eric bucked once more. Aaron applied pressure, not enough to injure, but enough to make breathing difficult. "I said stop." The fight drained out of Eric like water from a broken vessel. His body went slack. Not submission, defeat. The understanding that he'd brought a gun to a confrontation and still ended up outmatched. Around them, the bar remained frozen. Patrons pressed flat against the floor, too terrified to move. The bartender peered over the counter, eyes wide. Patricia stood perfectly still, her knuckles white against the black serving tray she'd never released. Rain continued hammering the windows. The jukebox had finally cut out, leaving only the sound of labored breathing and distant thunder. Aaron leaned down, his mouth near Eric's ear. When he spoke, his voice was low enough that only Eric could hear. "I could kill you right now, easily. No one here would blame me. Self-defense, defense of others. You brought a weapon into a public place and opened fire." Aaron's tone remained conversational, detached. "But I'm not going to do that. Do you know why?" Eric said nothing, could say nothing with his face pressed against the sticky floor. "Because killing you accomplishes nothing," Aaron continued. "Your brother is still dead. My conscience is still stained. And tomorrow, there'd be another angry kid with another gun and another grievance. The cycle doesn't end with blood. It just metastasizes." Aaron shifted his weight slightly, allowing Eric to breathe more easily. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to let you up. You're going to walk out of here. And you're going to spend the rest of your life deciding whether revenge was worth what it cost you tonight. You don't get to," Eric managed, voice muffled against the floor. "You don't get to just let me go like you're merciful. I'm not merciful." Aaron interrupted. "I'm practical. Mercy would require me to believe I'm better than you. I'm not. I've just had more practice surviving impossible choices." He released Eric's arm and stood in one fluid motion, stepping back to create distance. "Get up." Eric pushed himself to his hands and knees, gasping. His wrist throbbed where Aaron had twisted it. His shoulder screamed. His ribs ached from impact with the floor. But he was alive, unbroken. Aaron stood 5 feet away, suit somehow still immaculate despite the violence. expression as calm as if he'd just finished a business meeting. He wasn't even breathing hard. Eric wanted to hate him more for that control, for the ease with which he'd dismantled the confrontation, for standing there like violence was just another language he spoke fluently. But beneath the hatred was something more complicated, something that felt almost like recognition, because Eric had spent 3 years imagining this moment. 3 years building Aaron Cabello into a monster in his mind, a villain who needed destroying. Instead, he'd found a man who looked as tired as Eric felt, who carried weight that didn't show on the surface, who'd taken responsibility for deaths Eric knew deep down couldn't be attributed to just one person's decisions. "Why?" Eric asked hoarsely, still on his knees. "Why did you really let me live?" Aaron was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because my sister walked away from this life hoping it would make her different, hoping distance would cleanse her. And I won't prove her wrong by filling this bar with your blood." He glanced toward Patricia. Something passed between them, a conversation in silence, years of history compressed into a look. Then Aaron's attention returned to Eric. "You want justice? Real justice? Stop wasting your life hunting ghosts. Go build something your brother would have been proud of. That's the only revenge that matters." Patricia finally moved. She set the serving tray down on the counter with a soft clink that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Then she stepped out from behind the bar, walking slowly toward where Eric knelt and Aaron stood. The patrons on the floor watched her pass, watched this woman they'd thought they knew reveal herself as someone entirely different, someone connected to power and violence and secrets that didn't belong in dive bars. Patricia stopped beside her brother, looked down at Eric. "Your brother's name was Tommy," she said quietly. "He was 23. He had a younger brother who he was trying to help, a mother he wanted to support." Her voice was steady but carried weight. "I didn't know any of that when I flagged his name. I should have. That's the part I can't take back." Eric stared up at her. "What difference does it make now?" "None," Patricia admitted. "But you deserve to hear it anyway. You deserve to know that what happened to Tommy wasn't random, and that the people responsible—" She glanced at Aaron. "We carry it, every day. That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No," Patricia said. "Nothing will make you feel better. I know that too." Aaron pulled a phone from his jacket pocket, dialed without looking at the screen. "It's me," he said when someone answered. "Send a car to Delgado's. Back entrance. 5 minutes." He paused. No cleanup. Just transport." He ended the call. Looked at Eric. "You have 2 choices. Walk out the front door now and disappear. Or wait for my people to arrive and facilitate your departure. Either way, you leave this city tonight, permanently. And if I don't, then I stop being reasonable," Aaron said simply. "And you learn why people who threaten my family don't get second chances." The promise in his voice was absolute. Eric looked between them, these 2 siblings who carried darkness like old scars, who'd tried to escape and failed in different ways. He understood suddenly that killing them wouldn't have resurrected Tommy, wouldn't have filled the emptiness, would have just added his own name to the long list of people destroyed by this world. Slowly, Eric stood. His legs shook, his pride was shattered, but he was alive. "Front door," he said quietly. Aaron nodded once, and Eric Martins walked out of Delgado's corner bar into the rain, leaving behind the revenge he'd spent 3 years pursuing. The door closed behind Eric with a soft click that seemed to echo louder than the gunshot had. For several long seconds, no one moved. The patrons remained pressed against the floor, afraid to breathe too loudly. The bartender stayed crouched behind the counter. The rain continued its relentless percussion against the windows. Patricia stood beside her brother in the center of the wreckage, surrounded by broken glass and overturned furniture and the sharp smell of gunpowder hanging in the air. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, or maybe they were shaking worse and she'd just stopped noticing. Aaron was the first to break the stillness. He turned toward the people scattered across the floor, his voice carrying that same calm authority it had held throughout the confrontation. "It's over," he said simply. "You can get up." Movement rippled through the room. Hesitant at first, people lifting their heads, checking for danger, slowly rising to their feet. A woman near the pool table was crying quietly. A man by the jukebox had his phone out, probably deciding whether calling the police was brave or suicidal. Aaron's eyes found him. "Put the phone away," the man did. Immediately. "Everyone here tonight witnessed an attempted armed robbery," Aaron continued, his tone reasonable but allowing no debate. "A disturbed individual with a personal grievance. The situation was resolved without casualties. That's the story. That's the only story. He let the words settle. Let people understand what he was offering. Simplicity in exchange for silence. Anyone who needs medical attention will be provided for. Anyone who needs compensation for trauma or damages will be contacted. But this incident, he gestured to the chaos around them, stays in this room. Understood? Heads nodded. Quick, eager to agree with the man who just disarmed a gunman with his bare hands. Aaron reached into his jacket, pulled out a slim leather wallet, and extracted a black business card. He handed it to the bartender, who'd finally emerged from behind the counter. Call that number tomorrow. Someone will handle everything. The bartender stared at the card like it might explode. Who are you? Aaron didn't answer. He just turned to Patricia. We need to talk. Privately. They stood in the stockroom behind the bar, surrounded by boxes of liquor and cleaning supplies and the lingering smell of old cigarettes. The single hanging bulb cast harsh shadows across Aaron's face, making him look older than 33, tired in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. Patricia leaned against a shelf, arms crossed, no longer able to maintain the composure that had carried her through the confrontation. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the reality was crashing down. Her anonymity was destroyed, her carefully constructed life shattered. Everyone in that bar now knew her real name, knew she was connected to violence and power and things that didn't belong in their world. You shouldn't have come, she said quietly. Aaron studied her. You're welcome. I'm serious, Aaron. You shouldn't... Her voice cracked. You should have stayed away. Let me handle it. Handle it how? Aaron's tone was gentle but direct. He had a rifle, Patricia. He came here to kill you. I know. She closed her eyes. I know. And maybe that would have been easier. Don't. Aaron's voice sharpened. Don't say that. Don't even think it. Patricia opened her eyes, met her brother's gaze. I've been running for 3 years, Aaron. Trying to build something clean. Something that didn't have blood in the foundation. And tonight proved what I already knew: there's no such thing as escape. Not for people like us. You're not. Yes, I am. She pushed off the shelf, sudden energy flooding through her exhaustion. I'm exactly like you, like Dad, like everyone in that world. I can change my name, change my address, change everything about my life, except the one thing that matters: I can't change what I've done, who I am. The decisions don't wash off just because I pour drinks now instead of signing death warrants. Aaron was quiet for a moment. Then, that's why you stayed so calm out there. Why you didn't panic when he said your name. Patricia nodded slowly. I've been waiting for this. Every day for 3 years. Waiting for someone to recognize me. To remember. To come looking for answers I couldn't give them. She laughed, bitter and broken. Tonight was almost a relief. At least the waiting is over. So what do you want to do? The question hung between them. Patricia looked around the stockroom. This place that had been her sanctuary, her escape, the mundane, ordinary job that had felt like freedom because no one asked questions and no one knew her history. All of it was gone now. I can't stay here, she said finally. Even if the people tonight keep quiet, and they won't. Not forever. Eric knows where I am. And if he found me, others can too. I can protect you, Aaron said immediately. Provide security. Create a perimeter. No, Patricia's voice was firm. That's not protection, Aaron. That's a prison with better guards. I didn't leave the Empire just to live surrounded by your people, watching my every move. Then what? Patricia met her brother's eyes, saw the concern there, the love, the desperate need to fix this, to solve the problem, to keep her safe the only way he knew how. But some problems couldn't be solved with power and strategy. I need to leave, she said quietly. Really leave. Not just the city, the country. Go somewhere you can't follow, somewhere your network can't reach. Something passed across Aaron's face. Pain, maybe. Or recognition that he was losing her again, this time more permanently. You'd be alone, he said. Completely. No support, no safety net. I've been alone since I left. Patricia's voice was gentle but honest. The only difference is I've been alone while pretending you weren't watching, while pretending I could call if things got bad. This way is cleaner. This way is abandonment. No. She stepped forward, placed a hand on her brother's arm. This way is acceptance. You accepting that I can't be saved. Me accepting that loving you doesn't mean living in your world. Aaron looked down at her hand. His jaw tightened, the only sign of the emotion he was fighting to contain. I let you go once. It nearly killed me. I know, and you're asking me to do it again. I'm not asking. Patricia said softly. I'm telling you, because this time, I need you to really let go. No checking, no quarterly reports, no safety nets. Just let me disappear. The silence stretched between them. Years of shared history, shared trauma, the complicated love between siblings who'd survived something most people couldn't comprehend. Finally, Aaron nodded. Once. Sharp. I'll arrange documents. Passage. Everything you need. Thank you. But Patricia, his voice was rough now, emotion bleeding through despite his control. If you ever need me, if things get bad, if you're in danger, you call. Promise me. She wanted to refuse, wanted to make a clean break, but looking at her brother's face, seeing the fear beneath his composure, she couldn't. I promise, she said. Aaron pulled her into a hug then, fierce and desperate. Patricia buried her face against his shoulder and let herself cry for the first time in 3 years. For everything they'd lost, for everything they'd never have, for the impossible love between two people who'd been born into darkness and tried each in their own way to find light. When they finally separated, Aaron's eyes were wet too. Where will you go? He asked. Patricia smiled sadly. Somewhere you can't find me. And for once, Aaron didn't argue. The apartment Patricia had lived in for 3 years looked smaller when viewed through the lens of departure. 1 bedroom, a cramped kitchen, a bathroom with tiles that never quite came clean, furniture that had come with the place-worn couch, scratched table, bed that sagged in the middle. She'd never personalized it much. Never hung pictures or painted walls or made it feel like home. Because some part of her had always known this moment would come, Patricia moved through the space with mechanical efficiency. A suitcase, the same one she'd arrived with, lay open on the bed. She filled it with essentials, clothes that didn't stand out, comfortable shoes, a few books she'd never finished reading, the small amount of jewelry she owned. Everything else stayed behind. Kitchen supplies, toiletries that were half empty, the coffee maker she'd used every morning, the cheap lamp she'd bought at a thrift store. None of it mattered. None of it was worth carrying. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. The bar had closed hours ago. The police had never shown Aaron's influence extended that far, at least. The witnesses had scattered with their silence, purchased through fear or compensation or both. And Eric Martins was gone, probably halfway to another city by now, running from consequences the same way she was. Patricia zipped the suitcase closed, looked around one final time. 3 years of her life, condensed into one bag. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Aaron standing in the hallway. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman in her 40s, professional, unremarkable, the kind of face that wouldn't register in memory 5 minutes after seeing it. This is Renata, Aaron said without preamble. She specializes in disappearances. She'll handle everything. Renata stepped forward, offering a slim manila envelope. New passport, driver's license, birth certificate, bank cards attached to clean accounts. Everything you need for your new identity. Patricia took the envelope, opened it. Inside was a Canadian passport with her photo but a different name, Claire Moreau. Born in Montreal, 31 years old, a complete history that would withstand scrutiny. The backstory is simple, Renata continued in accented English. You're a freelance translator. Work remotely. Nomadic lifestyle explains why you move frequently. No family ties, no complicated relationships to maintain. Where? Patricia asked. That's your choice. Renata handed her a second, smaller envelope. This contains contacts in 6 different countries. People who can help you establish residence, find work, integrate quietly. None of them know each other. None of them know Aaron. You pick one, destroy the rest. Patricia looked at her brother. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Aaron's expression was carefully neutral. Sometimes people need to disappear. I help them. People you've hurt? Sometimes. He met her eyes. Sometimes people I'm trying to save. Patricia wondered which category she fell into. Probably both. There's a car waiting downstairs, Aaron said. It'll take you to a private airfield. From there, you'll fly to Toronto. After that, he gestured to the envelopes. You're on your own. The finality of it settled over her like a weight. This was it. The true severance. No more safety net. No more brother watching from a distance. Just her and whatever life she could build from nothing. Patricia picked up her suitcase, tucked the envelopes into her jacket pocket, took one last look at the apartment that had been her sanctuary and her prison. I need you to promise me something, she said, turning to Aaron. Anything. Don't look for me. Don't check. Don't verify I'm safe. Just let me be gone. Aaron's jaw tightened. Patricia. I mean it, Aaron. The only way this works is if you let go completely. If you keep tabs on me, someone will eventually notice. We'll follow the thread. And then I'm right back where I started being found because of who I'm connected to. And if something happens to you, if you need help, then I handle it myself. Her voice was firm. That's the cost of freedom. Facing danger without backup. Living without a net. I'm accepting that. You need to accept it too. The silence stretched between them. Patricia could see the war happening behind her brother's eyes. The desperate need to protect her battling against the understanding that protection would only trap her again. Finally, Aaron nodded. Okay, I'll let go. You swear? I swear. He stepped forward, placed both hands on her shoulders. But Patricia, if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to come back, or need something, or just, I want to talk, you know how to reach me. I do, and you won't. Patricia smiled sadly. Probably not. Aaron pulled her into one last embrace. This one different from the one at the bar, less desperate, more final. A goodbye that acknowledged this might be forever. I love you, he whispered against her hair. No matter where you go, no matter how much distance you put between us, that doesn't change. I know. Patricia's voice was thick with tears she was fighting to control. I love you too. That's why I have to do this. They separated. Aaron stepped back, creating physical distance to match the emotional chasm opening between them. Renata cleared her throat gently. We should go. The flight window is limited. Patricia nodded, picked up her suitcase, walked toward the door. She paused at the threshold. Looked back at her brother one final time. Aaron stood in the center of her empty apartment, hands in his pockets, expression carefully controlled. But his eyes were devastated. Be happy, he said quietly. That's all I want. Just be happy. I'll try, Patricia promised. Then she walked out the door and didn't look back. The cafe in Prague's Old Town served coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Patricia Claire now, always Claire, never Patricia, sat at a corner table with a laptop open in front of her. Translation work filled the screen. A medical document converting Czech to English, tedious but simple. The kind of work that paid bills without demanding pieces of her soul. Outside the window, tourists photographed the astronomical clock. Street musicians played for coins. Life moved with the chaotic energy of a city that had survived centuries and would survive centuries more. Claire had been in Prague for 8 months. Before that, Toronto for 4 months. Before that, a small town in Scotland for 6 weeks that had felt too isolated, too quiet, too much like hiding rather than living. Prague felt right. Big enough to disappear into. Beautiful enough to appreciate. Foreign enough that her accent didn't stand out among the international community. She'd found an apartment in Vinohrady, a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and Art Nouveau buildings and cafes on every corner. Nothing fancy, just a studio with tall windows and morning light that turned everything golden. She had a routine now. Coffee here every morning, translation work until lunch, afternoons exploring the city or reading in parks, evenings cooking simple meals and listening to music and sleeping without nightmares. It was ordinary, quiet. The life she'd dreamed about when she was 22 and drowning in her father's empire. And most days, it was enough. Claire closed her laptop as her coffee arrived, delivered by a barista who knew her order by heart but not her name. She'd kept herself deliberately anonymous, friendly but distant, the kind of regular who was pleasant but never invited deeper connection. It was safer that way. She'd learned that in Toronto, when she'd made the mistake of getting close to a neighbor, a kind older woman who'd invited her to dinner, asked about her family, probed gently into her past. Claire had told careful lies, but each question had felt like exposure. Like the life she'd built was tissue paper that could be shredded with one wrong answer. After that, she'd kept her distance, polite but impenetrable. It was lonely sometimes, but loneliness was the price of peace. Claire sipped her coffee and watched the street. A young couple argued near the clock. A child fed pigeons despite the signs prohibiting it. A man in a business suit checked his phone with the harried expression of someone perpetually behind schedule. Normal people living normal lives. Problems that were manageable. Conflicts that didn't end in bloodshed. She envied them sometimes. Their ability to worry about ordinary things. Traffic, bills, relationship drama. The luxury of problems that wouldn't get anyone killed. But she didn't regret leaving. Not anymore. The first few months had been hard. She'd woken up every morning expecting Eric or someone like him to appear, had jumped at loud noises, had mapped every exit of every building she entered, old habits from an old life. But gradually, the hypervigilance had faded, the nightmares had decreased, the constant weight of looking over her shoulder had lightened. She would never be completely free of her past. She understood that now. The names would always exist in her memory, Tommy Martin's and all the others, the decisions that couldn't be undone, but she could build something new alongside that history, could create a life where her past didn't define every moment of her present. That was the best version of redemption she could hope for. Claire finished her coffee and gathered her things. She had a client meeting this afternoon, a publishing house that needed a novel translated from English to French. Steady work, good pay, the kind of project that would keep her busy for months. As she stood to leave, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Her pulse quickened. Unknown numbers always triggered alarm. She opened the message. The astronomical clock is beautiful this time of year. A friend. Claire's breath caught. She looked around the cafe, scanned faces, searched for anyone watching her. Nothing. No one suspicious. No one paying attention. Her mind raced. The message was deliberately vague. Could be random. Could be spam. Could be. Her phone buzzed again. Don't worry. Just wanted you to know someone's thinking of you. Stay safe. Stay happy. Claire stared at the screen. Her hands trembled. She knew that phrasing. Stay happy. Aaron's last words to her. He'd found her. Despite his promise. Despite her precautions. Despite everything. Her first instinct was panic. To pack immediately. To run again. To find another city, another country, another identity. But then she read the message again. Really read it. Just wanted you to know someone's thinking of you. Not a threat. Not a check-in demanding response. Not an attempt to pull her back. Just acknowledgement. That despite the distance, despite the silence, she wasn't completely alone in the world. Claire's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed in public. She typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, she settled on 3 words. I'm okay, Aaron. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. A moment later. Good. That's all I needed to know. You won't hear from me again. And then the number went dark. Disconnected. No way to respond even if she'd wanted to. Claire sat back down, legs suddenly weak. Aaron had kept his promise mostly. He'd found her, yes. But he wasn't watching. Wasn't maintaining surveillance. Wasn't creating a safety net that would eventually trap her. He just needed to know she was alive. And now that he did, he was letting go again. Really letting go this time. Claire left the cafe and walked through Prague's winding streets. The sun was warm on her face. The air smelled like coffee and pastries and the river that cut through the city's heart. She thought about Aaron and whatever city he was ruling from, still carrying the weight of their father's empire, still making impossible decisions, still living in the darkness she'd escaped. She hoped he found peace too someday. Doubted he would, but that wasn't her responsibility anymore. Her responsibility was to the life she was building, the translations she completed, the quiet mornings in cafes, the possibility that maybe, eventually, she'd let someone in. Make a friend, risk connection, not today, but someday. Claire walked across the Charles Bridge as street artists painted tourists and musicians played instruments she couldn't name. The Vltava River flowed beneath her, carrying water from somewhere upstream to somewhere downstream. Constant motion, never stopping, always moving forward. She paused at the center of the bridge, looked out over the city that had become her sanctuary. Prague didn't know Patricia Cabello, didn't know about empires built on fear or brothers who became legends or the decisions that haunted quiet women in corner cafes. It only knew Claire Moreau, translator, nomad, ordinary person living an ordinary life. And for the first time since she'd walked away from everything she'd known, Patricia Cabello believed that might actually be enough. She pulled out her phone, looked at Aaron's final message one more time, then she deleted it. Deleted the entire conversation. Erased the number from her recent calls. Some connections had to be severed completely to become free. Claire pocketed her phone and continued across the bridge toward whatever came next. Behind her, the astronomical clock continued its centuries-old rotation, marking time, measuring moments, indifferent to the lives that passed beneath its face. And ahead of her, the city sprawled endlessly, full of possibility, full of strangers, full of the beautiful, terrifying freedom of anonymity. Patricia Cabello had escaped her inheritance. Claire Moreau would decide what came next. Thanks for staying with this story. Right till the final moment, you're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.
Родители, если есть, которые друзья поддержат тебя в какой-то момент, хотя бы просто отвлекут тебя от этих мыслей. А если у тебя, к примеру, там, семья, жена, к примеру, да, есть дети, то тут, наверное, поддержка только от них исходит какая-то. Вот. Чтобы не упиваться в своих мыслях о том, что какая нынче сложная жизнь. И, наверное, других-то вариантов, в принципе-то, и нету. Какие вот еще варианты, в принципе, изменить, поменять свою жизнь настолько, чтобы она была, ну, казалась тебе удачной, да, реализованным себя в жизни, в чем-то. В чем, вот как проявляется на самом деле у нас реализованность? Наверное, у 90% случаев это финансовое благополучие, финансовая независимость. Это, наверное, одно из таких ключевых моментов, когда человек, наверное, считает себя реализованным, да, в этой жизни. То есть, как добиться этого? То есть, с учетом того, что даже возьмем нашу страну, да, сколько миллионов людей здесь живет, как каждому добиться этого результата? Ну, понятно. И с каждым годом просто ситуация становится все хуже и хуже. Все дорожает, люди зарабатывают либо столько же. Ну, даже если они зарабатывают столько же, на самом деле этого все уже недостаточно. К чему это все приведет на самом деле? В оконцове, наверное, мир погрязнет в большую депрессию в какую-то. Какие-то войны, возможно, или еще что-то еще больше глобальных таких вещей, которые не приведут ни к чему хорошему на самом деле. Поддержка каждого человека именно для того, чтобы он держался, наверное, морально, заключается в том, что, ну, наверное, дом, в который ты приходишь, должен быть крепостью твоей, да, что это единственное должно быть место, где ты будешь чувствовать себя под защитой. Для этого было придумано, наверное, своя пещера изначально, потом свои какие-то чумы, палатки различные, да, потом все это превратилось. На данный момент это у нас дома, квартиры, в которые мы приходим и должны ощущать себя в безопасности, чтобы можно быть немного морально расслабленным с учетом того, что ты выходишь каждый день на работу, на улицу, и все равно давление вот это вот, оно все присутствует. Когда ты заходишь в магазин, видишь цены эти, да, и так далее, не можешь себе что-то там приобрести, позволить на ежедневной основе, это откладывает большой, наверное, отпечаток. Не, наверное, а точно. И поэтому, когда возвращаясь домой, ты чувствуешь, вот хотя бы есть типа уголок того места, куда ты можешь прийти. Уголок на самом деле человеку много тоже не надо. Можно хотеть большего, но на самом деле человеку одному много не надо. Да? Ему нужно спальное место, спокойное место, где можно подумать. Ну, это когда ты один, к примеру, да? Когда у тебя есть семья, к примеру, ты приходишь домой, опять-таки, тут хотя бы, да, поговорить о каких-то вещах. Просто об отрешенных вещах, наверное. И, возможно, при этих же условиях у тебя и появляется какая-то дополнительная мотивация для реализации себя. А когда у тебя нету ничего, вот это уже становится проблемой. И это у многих на самом деле. Что значит не иметь ничего? Тут, наверное, самое главное, дизмораль у человека еще возникает при том, что это уже, наверное, где-то в глубине души даже она возникает при даже хорошей финансовой подушке такой, которая у тебя есть, хороших финансовых деньгах, да, то есть, но нету вот внутреннего ощущения, к примеру, дружбы, семьи, любви и так далее. Это уже отдельно на самом деле разговор, потому что мы, вот, к примеру, можем взять, как сейчас вот Новстрой, если кто-то смотрит, насколько тяжело обладать такими финансами и не иметь, по сути, ничего. Ни друзей, ничего не иметь. Так главное это получается для бедных главное деньги, для богатых главное какое-то внутреннее ощущение нужности, не из-за денег. Вот такое вот. И это борьба какая-то такая и вот эти два слоя общества, богатые и бедные, они друг друга не понимают. На самом деле из-за этого, возможно. Потому что богатый человек, он уже не смотрит на деньги, он не считает эти деньги. Ему важно внутреннее вот это вот ощущение того, что он нужен без них даже. Это как Тони Старку сказали: а кто ты без костюма? На вот это я филантроп, тудым-сюдым, он сказал, да? Так и человеку, у которого много денег, ты задашь вопрос: а кто ты без денег? Ну, что ты представляешь себе без денег? Вот и это, наверное, возможно, таких людей богатых, как вот, например, там Новстрой, задав ему этот вопрос: а кто ты без денег? Он на него ответить-то и не сможет. Обратная сторона людей бедных, да, вот если мы посмотрим, человеку